Hi guys, this is Hirosaki. This story is all about what if Naruto formed his own pirate crew. Deep in the bowels of Impel Down, the world's most dangerous criminals are jailed and left to rot within 6 levels of hell. However, housed in the lowest level of hell, he is set free. Now, the last remnant of an old era has been set loose upon the world, but why is he so fascinated by ramen? Set during Impel Down Arc and beyond. Before we start, kindly like and subscribe to this channel and look over the description box for the author of this amazing storyline. Welcome aboard! Chapter 4, Fate and Hate. The fighting had already broken out in full force by the time Naruto and company reached the next level. They felt the heat long before they reached where the arch had once been, a blistering, sweltering haze that reached down deep into their bones beneath their fur cloaks and proceeded to throttle them senselessly. It could be felt even here, from the staircase. The higher they ascended, the worse it grew. Even Sasuke, it seemed, was not immune to the rising heat. Naruto was perversely pleased to see that not even his first mate could keep a straight face during their ascent. God, Tayuya gasped beside him, dabbing at her brow in a furtive effort to keep cool. It's so fucking hot. I agree. Mei sighed, loosening the hem of her collar. It is quite warm. Naruto shared their sentiment and was about to voice his own discontent when an idea struck him. Discarding his own coat, he threw the encumbering garment to the wayside and raised his right hand, calling forth the lightest of breezes to his side. Tayuya was the first one to notice the change. She all but purred as the breeze passed over her, providing momentary relief from the roiling inferno surrounding them. The sound of battle rang out somewhere to the north of this burning hell, but right now, all she felt was contentment. She shot her captain a warm and genuine smile. I fucking love you. She sighed. Naruto started in surprise. Crayo-op. His heartstrings felt like they were being attacked by invisible baby chipmunks. His own eyebrows shot up in unexpected surprise, but before he could comment on her impromptu confession, Mei beat her to the punch, sidling up to the other side of him and looping an arm in his own. Era, I didn't know you felt so strongly for him. Tayuya's face flushed darker than her hair. Be baka. I didn't mean it like that. Here we go again, Sasuke rumbled. This was precisely why he avoided females. It was times such as these that made him wonder why exactly he'd decided to follow Naruto in the first place. Well, that was simple enough, when he thought about it. Naruto was strong. Sasuke needed strong allies if he was ever to find his brother. Although he himself would have preferred being in charge of said group, he didn't mind handling the reins over to Naruto, who had been the one to free him in the first place. The blonde's fixation with procuring a crew and get the hell out of this hole was almost as single-minded as his own desire for vengeance. The Uchiha respected that. The man had driven, he knew what it was like to want someone dead. Just like him. Flashback. They were back in level 6 once more, mere moments from ascending the impromptu staircase to level 5. Sasuke had taken Naruto and Tayuya aside and confided in them, revealing to them just how he intended to track down his brother and kill him. Much could go amiss here in Impel Down. He felt safer explaining his purpose to the redhead and the blonde now, in case he should fall before the time came. Naruto and Tei listened in intense silence, but the moment he mentioned the organization with which his brother was associated, well, there were some questions. Several questions. Akatsuki? Naruto tilted his head to the side. What the hell is that? I've heard of them. Tayuya exclaimed. My old captain, Orochimaru, used to work with those assholes. They're sorta like the Shichibukai. You know, pirates that have joined the government? A lesser man might have missed the darkness that flitted over the blonde's visage just then. Sasuke was not a lesser man. He chose to keep it to himself, however, and let his captain speak. So, they work for the Marines? No. Tayuya slapped Naruto on the shin. I just said that they're like them. Rumor has it they work for whoever's the highest bidder. Naruto shot Sasuke a glance. Which would probably be the Tenryubito. Sasuke finished. You're correct. Regardless, they're a ruthless band of powerful pirates, the Akatsuki. He continued bitterly. I was no match for them in Mariajoa. They defeated me in less than an instant and turned me over to the Marines. I've been trapped in this hell ever since. This time there could be no mistaking the shadow that passed over their captain's face. His words seemed to drift by on a breeze as light as velvet, and, had Sasuke been listening, he might have heard him say, "At least you didn't get that damned mark on your back." "Huh?" "Nope, nothing." Naruto beamed, his sudden bout of depression gone with the wind. "Still, that's all the more reason to get a good crew. Then we'll kick all their asses." His nakama sweat dropped. Oi. End flashback. Hey! A sharp cry of indignation dragged Sasuke back to the present. Thanks a lot, missed bitch. Tayuya was cursing as Naruto, having somehow disentangled himself from the two of them, was now walking a good way ahead of the group. Now I've lost my breeze. It was all the Uchiha could do not to snort. He would follow this man, if only for a little while longer. It wasn't like he had anything better to do. Naruto said nothing as he stormed forward, his eyes darting about, absorbing everything. Bodies were strewn everywhere, some withered to dried husks, others, beaten to a bloody pulp, still others little more than that of crimson smears on the pavement. A small smile played at the edges of his mouth. Evidently, they were not the first ones to make it here after all. He could hear gunfire in the distance, the screams of the guards and jailers as they were overpowered by Luffy and the others. Naruto paid no heed to any of that. He glanced left, then right, as though searching for something. Or someone? Abruptly, he sucked in a breath and held it. For a moment, just a moment. The Avenger couldn't help but wonder, what was his captain thinking? Oi! He shouted at the top of his lungs. Is anyone still here? Sasuke face-bombed. That's what he was up to? Silence reigned supreme. It seemed Ivankov had already released the prisoners on this level. Sasuke sighed, thanking the gods for this gift. The last thing he wanted was another weirdo in their little band of misfits and vagabonds. Now, if they could just proceed without further incident. Yo! A voice answered. Over here, Baka Yoru, Kono Yoru. Damn you gods! Naruto blinked, his verbal tirade cut brutally short. Did you say something? He asked Sasuke. The swordsman shook his head viciously. I didn't hear anything. But Naruto would not be so easily dissuaded. Ladies? Tayuya and Mei simultaneously shrugged. Nope. I thought I heard something, too. Over here, you fool. Naruto paused at the edge of the catwalk and rounded on the voice, bringing himself face to face with one of the few cells lining the length of the wall. He could see any number of figures hunched down in the dark, but those were the ones too weak to move, too broken by a life behind bars. Who then had spoken? Who said that? Here. Naruto snapped to attention, leaning his head through the bars. You? He asked, addressing a shadow figure way in the back. There was a moment of silence as the man behind the bars adjusted his sunglasses, which impossibly glinted with light. Yes, sunglasses. Why anyone would wear such a thing in a prison or even be allowed was beyond him. But no one could have been prepared for what came next. Yo say ho. Know my name, know my fame, don't be lame. Eight Tails, that's me, the rap pin killer bee. Somewhere behind them, Mei stifled a giggle. Apparently, she found his routine endearing. Sasuke didn't. A fierce, predatory gleam entered the Uchiha's eye as he regarded the man crouched behind the bars.
"Why should we release you?" he demanded. "What skills do you have?"
"Ain't got no skills, fool."
B replied, "But I know how to fight, dat be true." Naruto shot Sasuke a pleading glance. "No," he replied. "But say away, Sook. We are not letting him out of there."
The Uchiha's scorn was barely concealed.
"He's annoying. We can't just leave him," argued the blonde. "Oh, yes we can," Sasuke insisted. "We can't," Naruto snapped back. "I'm the captain. I say he comes."
Exasperated, the Avenger drew his blade.
"You want me to cut you?" Naruto raised an arm in retaliation, the invisible eddies of his element swirling at his sleeve. "What was that, butt? Knock it off!"
Tayuya shrieked, her fists raising merciless lumps on both of their heads.
"Will you two take this seriously?"
Both men winced, mildly alarmed that Tayuya had been able to strike them despite the fact that they were far from a solid
Haki.
They wondered at her for a moment before lowering their respective gazes/weapons to the floor.
"TCH," Naruto grumbled, rubbing at his scalp with a sore hand. "Let's have a vote, then." "You first, Sasuke." "I think it's best we leave him," the swordsman told his nakama, decisiveness like iron in his voice.
"He has no skills we can use other than that abysmal rapping."
As if on cue, Killer Bee chose that very moment to pipe up again, much to Sasuke's chagrin. "A devil fruit resides inside my hide. Makin' beats and rhymes and I'm making 'em live. It's what a pirate needs to survive, battle after battle up here in the beehive. Toss me the keys bro and I'll come alive."
A vicious glare coupled with unsheathing of Kosangi silenced the up-and-coming rapper, dissuading him from continuing any further. When Sasuke was certain he wouldn't be interrupted again, he sheathed his sword and offered a final retort to make his point.
"Do we really want to put up with that? I think we should release him."
May put in, her words soft and fluid as her own element.
"He could be useful.
We'll never know if we don't take a risk here." All eyes fell upon Tayuya, the only crew member who had yet to voice an opinion, yet to cast a vote in favor or against for the releasing of prisoner.
"Oh hell no," the musician raised her hands to ward of their stares. "I'm staying out of this one." Sasuke frowned. "Tayuya." "Ugh, fine," she growled. "We already have a musician, in case you've forgotten. So, leave him locked up." "That's what I say."
Naruto regarded the keys in his nakama for a precious second longer, as though he were deciding whether or not to give a dog its bone.
"All right then," he whispered softly aloud. "If that's your decision then, as the captain, I hereby overrule you." With a flippant flick of a wrist, he flung the keys air and into the cell. There was a harsh rattle as they skidded across the floor, punctuated by a stunned silence as his three crewmates gawped at him. They had never once thought, "Why the hell did you do that?" Tayuya shrieked. "I thought we took a vote." Naruto gave her a pointed look. "Nakama can appear anywhere, Tayuya-chan. Don't you forget that." "But..." A loud clack pierced the silence as someone unshackled themselves. Silence. Then. Wee-ee-ee.
Naruto froze, his head turning in the direction of the voice as a wet squelching sound resounded from beyond the bars.
"Maybe we shouldn't be standing this close."
May was about to respond to that when all of a sudden, a horde of tentacles 8 in total came at them like mini torpedoes.
Sasuke hissed. "Move."
Everyone lurched backward in surprise as octopus tentacles stabbed outwards and burst through the bars, tearing the grate to pieces like so much timber.
Naruto laughed aloud. Well, this was unexpected. He danced a yard backwards, skipping in retreat as something monstrous took shape beyond the bars.
He couldn't quite make it out for certain in the faint glow offered by the flames, but he was vaguely certain it looked like a cross between a large ox and an octopus. What the fuck is that? Tayuya gawped. It's huge. Mei's reaction was only slightly less subdued. She simply arched an eyebrow and laughed softly at the otherwise grotesque display. Sasuke muttered blackly to himself, something about the four of them running a freak show and charging for admission. Naruto heard all of this and grinned. He was actually enjoying himself. To think, they'd find another nakama. Granted, the man didn't seem to possess any skills beyond that of this, his devil fruit the ghastly rhyming didn't count. Without warning, the tentacles retracted from whence they'd come, resolving into the large body of a tan, muscle-bound man bearing the kanji 4 iron upon his right shoulder. His fair, blonde hair and mustache stood out in a sharp contrast against his skin. Dark shades obscured his eyes and whatever else might have lurked behind those glasses. Much like the other prisoners, he wore the black and white prison garb of Impel Down, minus the sleeves. He strode out of the cell as if he owned it, whistling softly to himself, a spring in his step and a gleeful glint behind his glasses. Yo! He rapped, walking up to Naruto and flashing the peace sign. Thanks for letting me go, bro. I promise to follow you wherever, don't ya know? Yay! Instead of extending a hand, he offered a fist. Naruto hesitated a fraction of a second before he raised his own. Without a word he thrust forward, smacking his clenched knuckles against the man's with a resounding thwack. Both men grinned. Great. Sasuke grumbled. We've picked up another stray. Will we clash or be a smash? B wondered aloud, peering at Sasuke. Sasuke. I dare say it'll be a no-go. I'm a brat-hatin' outlaw, yeah. Sasuke glared bloody red daggers at Naruto. Next time, I get to pick the nakama. The Logia user laughed and slapped B on the back. But the rapping pirate wasn't finished. Yo! Killer B rhymed, thrusting 2 fingers imperiously toward a wide-eyed Tayuya and an amused Mei. Sound the alarm. The captain's got a woman on each arm. Sexy, lovely, full of charm. Better watch out, for you'll come to harm. Wee. Wham! Half a second later, Killer B found his face intimate with the deck in a way no self-respecting pirate desired, simultaneously nursing a rising welt upon his skull. Sneering dangerously, hand clutched into a fist, Tayuya stormed back to Naruto's side as though nothing happened. As though she hadn't single-handedly knocked out a man with a single punch. In that area alone, she clearly exceeded his expectations. Who would have thought such a spry little thing could be so damnably strong? Oh, cruel ordainer of fate, he thought to himself. Oh? He asked, nudging B with a toe. You okay? The man jerked back to life and leapt to his feet. Hey ho! I'm okay, don't ya know? Good. Without another word, Naruto started forward, moving from a walk to a jog, then an all-out run. Because from here on out, we're not taking a back seat to the action. Footsteps told him that his nakama were following him, matching him stride for stride. He grinned, looking briefly over his shoulder. Shall we show them how real pirates fight, everyone? He was rewarded by a chorus of affirmatives. Sasuke unsheathed his sword. Tayuya sneered. Mei smiled. Killer B pumped a fist. Let's go. Luffy knew something was amiss the moment the wind began to pick up. Because there could be no wind in Impel Down. Sound itself seemed to fade, before a piercing shriek slammed into his ears and left him all but deafened. He wasn't the only one, even as he and the others struggled with their sudden deafness. A sudden chill descended upon the sweltering hell that was level 4. The flames themselves seemed to flicker, fading as he looked on. But the silence was short-lived. With a sharp pop, sound returned to Luffy's world. That was when he heard it. When he saw it.
A keening green gust swept across the catwalks like a silent scythe, scouring them clean of enemy and ally alike. Someone screamed. Screamed, as they were flung into the flames of hell, as a blur of white gold zipped past and snatched them from the jaws of death at the last moment. The sounds of battle fell away into silence. Everyone was shocked by the sudden presence of the new arrivals. A dense fog hung over them, lifting a tad reluctantly before their passage. As one they advanced, walking right into the fray without so much as a care in the world. Ha! A familiar voice chortled from within the fog. Well done, ladies. It seems we've made quite the entrance. MMM. I'm glad you liked it, Naruto-kun. Hey! Don't get so cozy with him, May. Oi. Wee. Let's get this party started. The fog continued to spread, stretching its fingers through the hordes of bluggery and men nearest them, clinging to them like a second skin. It passed through the pirates harmlessly. The marines and jailers were not so fortunate. Several gagged as the mist suddenly solidified in their throats, sticking inside their lungs, gagging, choking, drowning them where they stood. It's him! One of the guards wailed in despair. He's finally here. Luffy's head snapped back and forth, a puppet severed from its strings. Because he was here. In force. The jailers of Impel Down seemed to realize this as well, if the puddles of urine pooling beneath their feet were any indication of how they felt. And still, none dared strike. Abruptly the murky mist fell away, exposing 5 faces to the burning hell. 5 faces that would stand forever in infamy. Whitebeard's grandson, Naruto Newgate. He's got a bounty of 500 million berry. Will ya stop calling me that? And he's not alone. Luffy realized this was truth, as he recognized a host of other individuals crowding up behind the blonde, 4 in total. Look there! Beside him, that's the Avenger, Uchiha Sasuke. 450 million berry. HN. Red Mistress, Tayuya. 400 million berry. Where the hell is Saldef? Water Shadow, Terumi May. 399 million berry. Era, it feels so nice to be recognized. Ox of the Sea, Killer Bee. 420 million berry. That's Killer Bee-sama, Baka Yaru, Kono Yaru. They all have bounties over 3 million. Jailers, guards and bluggery alike, everyone grew paler and paler as they recognized each individual, their own peril becoming more and more apparent with each passing second. Some seemed to wilt. Others simply soiled themselves where they stood. It had been bad enough that they were forced to face this crowd of Okama, but now, this? Luffy was almost jealous. All of their bounties were higher than his. Naruto said nothing more. He simply stood there, eyes agleam with controlled bloodlust. He brought with him not an army, as they'd expected, but rather, a small group. Luffy didn't have to look at them to know they were strong. There was simply an aura of supreme confidence about these people. Confidence in themselves, and confidence in their captain. Shishishi. Despite the direness of the situation, the Straw Hat captain couldn't help but chuckle. Looks like he found some nakama of his own. Let's play a game, shall we? Naruto announced suddenly. Whoever defeats the most wins. The guards didn't take very kindly to that. No, they did not. Get him. Get him. Him. Naruto whirled as 3 of the bluggery charged him at once, driving one's brain against the inside of his skull with a flying kick, then following through, grabbed the other 2's head, cracked them together like eggs, and dropped them. A 4th came from the side, roaring like a barbarian with its axe raised over its head. The grandson of Newgate snorted and rolled his eyes at the sheer imbecility of such a tactic, before breaking the creature's nose with a simple swing of his wrist. Then he let it lie down. That's 4, Sasuke. Shay. The Uchiha snorted somewhere to the east, pausing briefly in his bout with a quartet of hapless prison guards. I'm already on. Bakram!
With a sudden swing, he sent them sprawling.
8. Nani? 16.
May chorused calmly as she dealt one of their jailers a smoldering look that could melt bone. The man noodled and sank to the ground in a boneless heap.
Oops, she amended with a sultry smile. Perhaps I meant 17. Both men blanched. That's not fair. Wee-ee.
The newest member of their crew cackled.
Fear the bee. He's already got 23. Nanda?
Ignoring her crew, Tayuya snarled and stalked forward into the fray. She'd glimpsed someone during the lull, and now she was intent on finding him. There would be time for games later. Now she wanted nothing more than to find that little imp and crush him to a bloody pulp. With her ability, it didn't take long for her to discern the sound of a flute in the rising cacophony of cries and curses surrounding her.
Gotcha!
Tayuya shouted a hair's breadth louder than she normally would. The sound slammed into the guards like an invisible wall, casting them aside like so much refuse and presenting her a path forward.
Presenting her with her long-awaited prey. Saldef. Saldef.
The little imp paled at the sight of her, this vindictive redhead back from the pits of hell, her mouth twisted into a devilish smirk. It didn't take him long to realize what she was after, what she'd come to reclaim. It took him even less to turn tail and run. Sasuke felt a touch of pity for the fool as he fled. There was no chance in hell that he was going to escape from her, no matter how fast he ran.
Gimme back my flute, you little fucking midget. Get her, Blueberry.
The imp wailed, pressing the flute to his lips, playing with a desperation born of both fear and terror.
Don't let her get me.
The Blueberry themselves stiffened in response to the melody, pausing only for the tune to send the horde of monsters swarming toward the startled redhead.
Asshole!
She snarled, chasing after the impish little man.
That's my technique. Allow me.
May stepped forward, the slyest of smiles playing at her full lips.
I suggest you stand well back from this. Without another word, the mist woman drew in a deep breath and exhaled mightily.
She lived up to her name well, spewing an acrid cloud of dense fog from her lips to envelop most of the walkway. The Blueberry charged into the mist without thought or care, heedless of their own potential peril.
It was their first and last mistake. Sasuke watched them keenly, ready to strike them down with his blade if need be.
In the end, he needn't have bothered. Because the Blueberry began to melt. Their features sloughed off their faces, their bodies withering in the seemingly innocuous mist. Naruto gawped at them in disbelief, leaving the abominations to paw and claw at one another in their feeble attempts to save themselves.
But to no avail.
Their struggles only hastened their decay, leaving them to collapse in a pool of melted metal and sludge. For the first time B was left without words.
Sasuke seemed to share his keen sentiment. The swordsman actually jumped. Nanda? Well, shit. Naruto gawped, nutting the goopy puddle with a toe. Acid mist. That's a new one. Do you like it? May offered a small smile.
I can change its pH level at a whim, it's completely harmless now.
And of course, I'm immune to my own technique. Naruto didn't know what to say to that.
A mist that could melt just about anything in the span of several seconds, scary stuff.
Reminds me to stay on her good side.
He shook himself with a shiver.
Where was Tayuya, anyway?
They'd lost track of her in the chaos. Fear lodged itself in the pit of his stomach.
Surely the redhead hadn't been.
Victory! Everyone craned their necks at Tayuya's piercing cry of triumph. The redhead practically bounced back to them, her most precious possession clutched firmly in her hand.
The flute.
It was a small, almost tiny thing, but then again, appearances could be deceiving. She was covered in blood from head to toe, leaving little guess as to Seldetha's end.
I killed him. She cackled gleefully. I killed the little bastard. She thrust her hard-won prize up for them all to see, delight prancing in her hazel eyes. Yo! B cackled. Tay knows how to fight, Tay knows how to sing. Don't mess with her or y'all feel her sting. Everyone, even Naruto, cringed, in preparation of another scathing rebuttal from the redhead. Imagine their surprise when she offered a sly smile instead. You know what, B? She grinned. You keep flattering me like that, and I think we'll actually get along. It'll be a smash. B chorused. I'll kick your ass. Not on de grass. The two of them laughed at their impromptu rhyme and struck a simultaneous pose, fingers splayed toward the scalding ceiling. Yay/yay. Sasuke's sweat dropped. I'm surrounded by idiots. Does that include me? Naruto asked innocently. You rusey. The dull creaking of a door ended their little game, drawing everyone's attention. Was the enemy giving up so easily? Naruto frowned, a prickling of warning from his observation haki told him all was not well. He flung up a gale and just in time, prison bullets whipped past them, the nets spiraling harmlessly away in the wind. Others weren't so lucky. Lacking the elemental prowess of the Logia, they found themselves captured, bound in the mesh like a spider trapped within a web. This is the fortress of hell. They balked, alarmed to find themselves face to face with the assistant warden himself, Hannibal. You shall not pass. The astonishment swiftly wore off as a weary, exhausted Luffy took a step forward, demanding that the man move. Did he move? He did not. He watched them for a time, even admired Hannibal's refusal to fall after the first few jet pistols. Naruto sighed, and pulled down on the hem of his collar. They didn't have time for this. Sasuke? On it. The Avenger stepped forward, fixing Hannibal firmly within his gaze, an easy fact when one saw that he'd just been knocked down again by Luffy. A small smile played at the edges of the Avenger's lips, his coal-black eyes flaring a harsh crimson as the world looked on. Don't kill him. Naruto warned as Sasuke's right eye began to bleed. We just want to scare him a little. Maybe knock him out. The Uchiha snorted. Amaterasu. But before he could fire off the lethal technique, the guards on the stairwell started screaming. Help! Sasuke blinked, his concentration soldered by the sudden tide of shadow that came sweeping down the stairs. It was as if the ground itself had swallowed the guards whole. Luffy and Hannibal froze, their bout ended in an instant by this sudden intrusion. Just give it up. A rough voice cackled from out of the blackness. Spouting all that crap about justice or evil. You can look all over the world, but you'll never find an answer. A booted foot materialized deep within that sick swirl of shadow and smashed itself into the assistant warden's face, putting him down for good. Ridiculous. Its owner materialized, a large, pot-bellied man wearing dark coat and even darker trousers. His broken teeth bore all the semblance of a smile, but it did not reach his eyes. Shadow spouted from his back, disgorging all the guards he'd captured, spewing them out like so much refuse. It was as if the man were darkness itself. Oh! The man laughed aloud as his crew materialized behind him. Well, this sure is an impressive group. We've walked in on a pretty major incident, huh? Teach. Jinbei growled. What are you doing here? His white eyes narrowed. Or I suppose I should call you Blackbeard now? Naruto and Luffy bristled as one, but it was the blonde who was truly affected. In his mind's eye he saw it all over again. The blood. So much blood. Blackbeard. Hey, no need to be so violent. The now-named Blackbeard grinned jovially. Mind unclenching that fist of yours? Oh yeah, I heard you and Ace were good friends, huh? But I'm not the one you should be blaming here. Zay ha ha ha.
A tiny smile broke out on Naruto's chiseled face, like a crack etching along a stone surface. He laughed, then, it was a deep, throaty sound, not a thing like himself. The wind, keening like a lost child, stirred his ragged blonde hair, caressing it with cold fingers, gathering in the palm of his hand as the whole of level 4 looked on. Blackbeard. Teach frowned, rounding on the blonde as though seeing him for the first time. His eyes widened in recognition. Ho! He laughed. Well, if it isn't Naruto. Long time no see. How long has it been? A decade? 2? His grin grew lecherous as he beheld Tayuya and Mei. Nice pair of broads you got there. Looks like prison life has treated you well, eh? His gaze found Sasuke and Killer Bee. You've even got yourself a crew. I'm proud of ya, kid. Proud? Naruto snarled, his pupils dilating as increased adrenaline began to pump through his system, his visible eye blue and bright with bloodlust. At the sight, their cook felt her blood vibrate. His teeth gleamed wolfishly in the shadow of his ragged locks. You have some nerve saying that, Teach. His voice rose over the din. After what you did. Ha! To my mother. The keening of the wind erupted into a furious roar, a veritable tornado swirling in his palm, compressed into a sinister sphere. Teach balked at it, his crew balked at it, hell, everyone did. Naruto thrust his hand toward the ceiling, his scream lost over the howling storm. Naruto snarled and flung his hand even further to the heavens. Teach, your head is mine. That's some screech, Tayuya winced, cringing as the wind whipped itself higher and higher. Even with her own devil fruit ability, she found she had to cover her ears just to drown out the incessant shriek of the rising maelstrom. The bitter keening of the wind rose in pitch, scouring the tormented hell that they found themselves in. And still it spiraled higher, sparking and spitting in the blonde's upturned palm. His eyes flashed a foul crimson color, his pupils snapping slitted as he brought his arm back to launch the massive technique. Get the fuck out of the way. They didn't waste any time, she ducked backwards, as did Bee, dragging Tayuya with them. Sasuke had less than an instant to register these words before Naruto flung his technique forward. The Uchiha lurched into motion, arching his back in mid-lunge. His hair blew across his face as something passed with impossible speed overhead. He glimpsed nothing more than a ripple in the air itself, the faintest wisp of steam or mist wadded into a ball like so much discarded parchment. Had he not been looking right at it, indeed, expecting something very much like it, he'd never have known it was there. Blackbeard didn't even have time to blink. One moment Naruto was holding it, the next, he flung it, just like its namesake. Raisin Shuriken. And the world erupted. Chapter 5, Hatred is the most powerful poison. Die. Tayuya cried out in shock and surprise as the Raisin Shuriken struck, spreading outward in a roiling dome of shrieking fury. It was like standing in the eye of the hurricane, watching the storm rage around you while you yourself were left unharmed. Naruto stood at the center of it all, his chest heaving in short, angry gasps, rasping with exertion as he lowered his arm to survey his work. Even from here, the redhead could see the burn marks lining his left arm. His sleeve had been obliterated by his own attack, marring the entirety of his wrist and elbow in angry red welts. Such power, Mei purred to herself, perversely pleased by their captain's devil fruit display. Tayuya shared her opinion. Still the explosion swelled, forcing everyone back as its blast radius expanded, striking down anyone fool enough to stand their ground. Pirate, jailer, and bluggery alike, each found themselves shredded by the powerful squall, all those fools enough not to currents of heaven itself. Sasuke gritted his teeth. Watch out for the shockwave. Yo! Bee cackled, the boss knows how to rock and roll. Ya catches my flow? Everyone face-vaulted. No, we don't. Gradually the air currents began to abate.
Naruto waved a hand and banished the last blast, leaving nothing but dust and debris in its wake. There was a silence. Tayuya grimaced. Well, shit. She tried to whistle, ended up choking on the smoke instead. You really don't hold back, don't ya? Naruto flung an arm outward, barring her path. It's not over yet. Tayuya blinked. Rolled her eyes. What do you mean it's not over? She asked, incredulous. You saw that explosion. He'd have to be a fucking monster to have survived. Zihahaha. That. The words dried up in her throat and her blood turned to ice as she saw a massive form stir within the smoke. Tayuya frowned and Mei alongside her, lips pursing in displeasure as the figure of Marshal D. Teach became visible and apparent to the onlookers. You really do pack a punch, Naruto. Teach's voice cackled as the smoke cleared. You could have killed me with that just now. Teach himself had fared worse than Naruto she saw, much worse. The massive man had lost his coat in the explosion, amongst other things. He was missing most of his right arm and all of his left leg. The wounds had forced him to a knee, his injuries dripping fresh ichor with a steady drip drip drip. The rest of his crew lay scattered about the floor like so much refuse, each bleeding from the dozens of wounds inflicted by the Naruto's unholy Raisin Shuriken technique. They might live, if they received treatment in time, eh? To everyone's dismay, the Blackbeard pirates began to pick themselves up. Persistent bastards. Tayuya snarled, her words little more than a furious hiss. Naruto wasn't fazed in the slightest. He simply raised his scarred palm again. A second Raisin Shuriken burst to life in his hand, growing in size and volume with each passing second. His eyes pulsed a maddened, malevolent red that promised pain. I guess I'll have to use my full power this time. Teach flung his remaining arm forward and opened a hand, fingers splayed and grasping. Korozu! This time there was no witty retort. Naruto simply balked as his feet lifted from the floor seemingly against their own volition, leaving his crew to balk as tens of tendrils of darkness hauled him forward. He tried to hurl the Raisin Shuriken at Teach as he flew, but the deadly missile buzzed harmlessly overhead and through the air, into Teach's awaiting grasp. To everyone's disbelief, Naruto was grabbed as though he were solid. There was a moment of pained silence as Blackbeard's hand closed around Naruto's neck, hoisting him off the ground and into the air. Say ha ha ha. Teach cackled, certain in his triumph. That's right. You can't use your ability now. Weren't expecting this, were you, Naruto? He punctuated the blonde's name with a devastating drop, slamming the blonde face first into the unyielding, scalding floor of Impel Down. There was a sharp snapping sound as he struck the floor, showering everyone in a cloud of dust and upturned stones. Despite his animosity towards the blonde for attacking Blackbeard first, Monkey D. Luffy felt a twinge of sympathy for him at that very moment. Even he would be rolling around on the ground after a hit like that. Naruto! Tayuya shouted. Stay back! Came the strangled reply. He's mine to finish. Luffy thought he was an idot. Tayuya seemed to share his opinion, her eyes wide with concern, only to relax moments later at the sound of her sensuous voice. Don't go scaring us like that, dumbass. She sighed, dabbing a bead of sweat from her brow. I was worried. He rules 'em all. B chorused. The Capien cannot fall. Mei smiled softly. As expected of Naruto-kun. Sasuke smirked as the last of the dust began to clear. If he couldn't do at least this much, then he wouldn't be worthy of being captain. Luffy gawped. After seeing this, he was inclined to agree. This guy. Because Naruto hadn't fallen. He was still standing, he'd taken the full brunt of the drop with his legs alone, leaving Teach hunched over him. Unprotected. Vulnerable. Even as Luffy realized that this would be the perfect time to strike, to take a shot at the large man's unprotected back, Naruto swarmed into motion, snapping his neck around, sinking his teeth into Blackbeard's arm. To his credit, Teach didn't release Naruto. That proved to be a mistake. A fatal mistake, as Naruto used the momentum of his bite to thrash his legs against the ground, bringing his body full circle. Now he was facing Blackbeard. And his hands were still free. "For my mother," he hissed. "Zha!" Teach sneered and squeezed Naruto's throat even tighter, arrogant in his victory. "What are ya gonna do? So long as got a hold of ya, you can't use your kaze no mi." "DISCLAIMER, the largest ring," Naruto muttered, bringing both hands forward and upward, clenched into fists. Teach had just enough time to glance down, to see the clenched hands feel them pressing up against his chest before he recognized the technique. Whitebird's grandson flashed Blackbeard a grin that made the devil look tame. His muscles bulged with unseen power, not the power of his devil fruit, but one just as, if not more so, deadlier than the rest, surging through his clenched hands and into his unwitting target. He uttered one word and one word only, giving name to a technique that sent a silent shiver of remembrance down Luffy's spine. "Rokugan." Teach yelled in pained surprise as a wave of supersonic energy ripped up and through his chest, leaving him outwardly untouched. Inward was another matter. The deadly blast tore through his insides like a hurricane, making a massacre of muscle and bone before smashing into the stairwell over yonder. Blood fountained forth between Teach's teeth, pouring down onto the battered blonde below, the sudden shock of impact causing his grip to slacken, just for a moment. And in that moment, the very instant of his release, Naruto pounced, cackling madly. "Oi," Tayuya swallowed, frightened by the sudden change in his behavior. "Is he okay?" Ping. Naruto stopped short as a bullet pierced his skull, dissipating harmlessly in a current of wind. "Protect the captain." Van Augur snapped, raising his rifle to reload for a second if not frivolous line of fire. That proved his first and last mistake, because instead of ending Teach, his comment caused Naruto to turn on him and the rest of the Blackbeard pirates. He was smiling, grinning from ear to ear, his mouth stretched in a rictus of mocking disapproval. Ah. He tittered blackly, "Looks like someone forgot to teach you bitches the pecking order." May licked her lips in silent approval. Something about this side of Naruto made her blood sing. Luffy saw only a whirlwind of black and red as the blonde ripped into Blackbeard's men. One moment Burgess was gawping at the flailing form of his captain, the next he was on the ground bleeding, clutching at what had once been his left leg. Doc Q fared even worse. Luffy didn't see what Naruto did, but he did see the doctor's head roll away alongside that of his horse, their expressions transfixied somewhere between horror and sheer disbelief that they'd been killed off so quickly. "Shouldn't we do something?" Tayuya wondered aloud. Sasuke shook his head solemnly. "This is vengeance. We will not interfere." He understood full well the state Naruto was in, far be it from him to deny the blonde the change to avenge his mother. Whatever Blackbeard had done to her must have been horrific, because Naruto gave him and his men absolutely no quarter. Lafitte managed to spread his wings and make it into the air, for all the good it did him. Naruto was suddenly above, his fingers closing around those white feathers in a vice. Laughing, he yanked hard. Blood spattered the searing cobblestones, steaming amidst the pale man's screams as the now useless appendages flopped away from him to burn amidst the fires of level 4. A heartbeat later their owner joined them caroming off the wall to land amidst the fires conjured by the burning vats. Crying in pain, he somehow scrambled back onto the bridge before the blonde blasted him into Blackbeard's rising form. Marshal D. Teach, having only just now struggled to his feet, found himself driven to the floor yet again spitting blood as the slight man crashed into him. Neither rose again. All this had happened in the time it took for Van Augur to reload. Naruto backhanded him almost contemptuously, then he turned upon Teach. Impossibly, the massive man was still getting back up. But this time you could see the fear in his eyes, smell the terror emanating from his very soul. "Damn it, brat!" he hissed at Naruto. "I hate you. You hate the fact that you're powerless to stop me. Naruto advanced upon him now, a black gale stemming from his body. That you're completely outmatched. Well, imagine feeling the way you do now all of the time like I have. Fools. Sneering, he ripped the hulking captain from his feet and dashed him against the bridge like a ragdoll. Once. Twice. 3 times. How do you think my mother Kushina felt when you ganged up on her in the rain and she had no way out? Well, now it's your turn. Snarling, he flung him away to join his broken band of pirates. I hope you enjoy it. Because I sure as hell plan to. Gasping, Blackbeard tried to raise his remaining arm. Korozu. Kaze no Yaiba. Naruto roared, opening another rent in Teach's chest before he could enact the gravitational pull. He struck down again and again and again, and only when he was certain that the boisterous Buffoon would not rise again did he finally advance, stalking towards Blackbeard, his fingers closing in for the kill. Hydra. Naruto's haki prickled in warning. He and his crew flung themselves aside just as a massive beast of pure poison slammed into the walkway they'd recently occupied. The Blackbeard pirates, injured as they were not so fortunate. They remained where they were, beaten and broken, unable to retreat as the viscous creature crashed down around them, dousing them in the lethal liquid. Crap, it's poison! Teach yelled, clutching at himself with his remaining arm, gasping as he and his crew swiftly succumbed to its effects. Damn you, Magellan! And you too, Naruto! I won't forget this. Just you wait. I will. With a gasp he flopped over onto his stomach, unconscious. Think he's playing dead? Sasuke wondered. I wouldn't put it past him. Naruto growled. Then he saw the poison creeping towards them and sighed. Magellan. Of all the times. You're going back in your cage, boy. The Warden roared. Naruto glanced at his first mate. Sasuke? The Uchiha unsheathed his blade. On it. Magellan staggered half a step forward, alarmed to find a slice of crimson opening on his belly. When did he? A blur of blood-soaked black and white appeared in his paraphils, opening another rent in his coat. Uchiha Sasuke skipped backwards, narrowly evading the globs of poison as they spattered from the wound. Get him! Tayuya raised the flute to her lips, and that was all the Warden knew. Before he could blink, before he could think, he found himself immobilized. A fine mist gathered about his face, searing into his skin, seeping through the deadly coat of poison he wore. Damn it be! Naruto spat. I told you not to touch him. He drew back his hand, revealing the technique he'd been cradling there all along. Sho! Odama! Raisin Shuriken! Luffy's last sight was of a raisin shuriken so large it blurred the world white. Then the whole level 4 simply disappeared. Preview. Sasuke shot Naruto a pointed glare. Alright. The captain flung up his hands in consternation. I'll let you pick this time. HN. The Uchiha permitted himself the smallest of smile as he inspected the surrounding cell block. Naruto might be a stubborn man at times, but he knew when to take and when to give the crew what they wanted. His own bloodlust had been satiated by the subsequent slaughter of Teach and later Magellan, though he suspected both would be back to torment them soon. A man like Magellan wouldn't be trapped in an illusion for long. And Teach, would Magellan's poison truly be enough to kill him? Sasuke held an unspoken sliver of doubt in his soul. Sasuke wasn't paying any attention to his captain's musings. His attention was riveted on a nearby cell. Oi, what's your name? The man raised his head, his dark features sharpening in a slight smile. Senju Hashirama. Shoot anything 10-10. Nice to meet ya, boss. You're not a fruit user? Sasuke arched an eyebrow, mildly impressed by both the power and accuracy of her shot. Nope. The brunette shook her head. All natural ability right here. A slight frown marred the features of her face. That's not a problem, is it? Of course not. Oi, aren't you forgetting someone?
Naruto dodged aside as a wave of golden energy streaked past, tearing a swath of destruction where he'd been standing mere moments before.
Mei gasped in shock.
But that's
not this guy again. Tayuya groaned.
They found themselves face to face with a massive mountain of a man, his face hidden in the depths of shadow.
Zaraka Kenpachi, madman of the South Blue, grinned from ear to ear. Oi, brat of Whitebeard. Naruto growled. Oh, for the love of, I'm not interested in fighting you right now. Cackling, the swordsman brought his blade crashing down. I'm not giving you a choice, shitty brat. Chapter 6, Legends.
All the world was red.
Rage sang its sinister song through Uzumaki Naruto's mind as he scoured the smoldering stones that had once been level 4, his normally blue eyes now a bloody red. Gone. They were all gone. Try as he might, he'd not found a single trace of Teach or his crew, and it infuriated him to no end. There should at least be some remains of the Blackbeard pirates, something to signify that they were finished. But he couldn't find anything, nothing at all. It was as if his Cho-Odama Raisin Shuriken had utterly obliterated any and all traces of their existence, leaving nothing but burning rubble behind. Had they fallen into the burning lake, he wondered? He hoped so. It was only fitting that Blackbeard burn in hell for his crimes. For killing Mama and landing him in this god-forsaken place. But he couldn't burn until a certain blonde knew he was dead. Unlike a certain warden.
Magellan lay sprawled out to their right, his body broken, mind trapped in one of Sasuke's ill illusions.
The warden wouldn't be going anywhere for a good while. But that didn't matter. What mattered was finding actual proof of their deaths, something to tell him that they hadn't slipped away during the explosion, that they hadn't survived Magellan's poison. Anything to tell him that retribution had been made, pain for the loss of his mother paid in spades. Tell me I avenged you, Mama. Please just tell me. Sun Cho. He has to be dead. Gotta be. There's just no way he could have survived that. He was bleeding before the poison hit, and then the damage from that second Raisin Shuriken. Sun Cho? But what if he isn't? What if he escaped? What if still around here somewhere, just waiting for me to lower my guard? He already took Mama away from me, I won't let him take my crew. Sun Cho. What? He rounded on the voice calling him, eyes wild beneath his battered blonde bangs. The look Mei was giving him proved different from her smoldering smiles, her expression was one of empathy, sympathy for his plight. Naruto did his best to remind himself of that, relaxing his shoulders before turning fully to formally address his crew. It was suddenly so hard to remember that they were on his side, just innocent bystanders or not so innocent in Sasuke's case in his vendetta against Blackbeard. They had little to no knowledge of his motives, and they just witnessed him kill in cold blood. He was treading on mighty thin ice here. Snap at them now, and their tenuous alliance might very well fall through. You alright? Alright? Tayuya asked at last. I'm just fine. No. No, I'm not. I'll never be alright. It's done. No, it isn't. Not until I see a body. I can move on. Won't. Can't. Never. Never. What was your deal with him anyway? The redhead persisted. Sounded like the two of you had some history. A muscle jumped in Naruto's jaw. Whoa. Alright. Sensitive subject, sorry.
No, he forced the word through clenched teeth, willing his mouth to relax.
If I'm going to be your captain, I shouldn't be keeping secrets, anyway. I suppose it's time I told you. Have you ever heard of Kushina, the killer Uzumaki? Confusion knotted their faces. I have. Mei spoke at last. Supposedly she was wanted for betraying the Marines. Murdered an entire platoon and jumped ship, or so I hear. Ha! You don't know the half of it. Naruto felt a bitter pang of longing stir in his chest. That murderer you speak of was my mom. She taught me damned near everything she knew, once I was old enough to crawl, not walk, crawl. Damn near beat it into me with a stick. Tekai, Rankyaku, Jippo, Saro, Shurgan, even the Rokugan, I knew it all by the time I was 7 years old. A touch of surprise cracked Sasuke's granite expression. That would explain quite a bit. My mother was an accomplished fighter, he continued, suppressing a grisly grimace. But she didn't see eye to eye with the Marines and their so-called justice. Probably why she butchered an entire platoon, and up and made off with some pirate in the first place. Turns out that pirate just so happened to be the one and only son of Whitebeard, a fact my old man saw fit to omit before the Navy caught up to him on some island down in the Grand Line. Mama said she only ever met old Shirohige once, said he came by to recover my da's body and pay his repsex, or so the story goes. I was just a babe back then, never saw him again until after she. His breath hitched then, the words kicking and screaming in his throat, refusing to comply. He forced them to. Until after she fought Blackbeard. And lost. Memories rose to mock him. He was suddenly a boy again, a quivering heap sprawled on the rain-soaked soil while his mother fought and died only yards away in the rain at his back. They'd given the Blackbeard pirates hell, but they had been two against many. Too many. He'd had the power back then, but it wasn't enough. It couldn't close the gap that inexperience created when faced with a superior foe. Lacking the heart to defend his mother had been his first and last mistake. Failing to realize she had been the target was his second. They'd never come for him at all. He'd been left there to rot. The same could be said of his mother's body. Zehaha, even in death, or was he even truly gone? Teach's words still mocked him. Better luck next time, kid. Now he had will and power in spades, thanks to the fruit he'd eaten. Power enough to obliterate Teach, but not enough to bring his mother back. Never enough. So, what happened? Ultimately it was Sasuke who forced him to continue his tale. The Uchiha's expression suggested he was more than a touch interested in the outcome of this story. Naruto sighed and continued to weave his painful yarn. Whitebeard came back a few days later. His boys found me and nursed me back to health. Offered me his protection when I finally got better, said he was sorry about Mom, that family had to stick together and all that bullshit. I spat in his face. He never said anything, just up and walked away. Never saw him again. Hell, I didn't even know he was still alive, until a few hours ago. She B drawled, crossing both arms in his signature X-shaped formation. Dat news musta caused a fitty tie. His rhyme ended with a steaming, swelling welt on his head, administered by Tayuya. That's enough out of you. Naruto managed a wan smile at their antics. It made him feel better, if only a little. As far as I'm concerned, old Whitebeard is just as much to blame for this whole mess as Blackbeard. If he dealt with Teach before he started up way back, my mother wouldn't be dead. And I wouldn't have spent the last 3 years in this hole of a hell. I don't care if he's my grandfather. I aim to give him a piece of my mind when I see him at Marineford. He's owed that much, at least. May gawped at him, thunderstruck. You're Whitebeard's grandson. Didn't I just get done saying that? Yes, we've been over this already. Sasuke sighed. That hasn't changed. And neither has our objective. We need to escape before reinforcements arrive. And stop the execution, B chimed in, still rubbing at the bruise Tayuya had given him.
3 sets of eyes turned toward him, incredulous that he'd actually spoken a single sentence, rather than rap. The dark-skinned sailor was quick to realize this.
We gotta go, don't ya know?
Naruto sighed, but the words were soft, and without rancor.
Knew it was too good to be true.
With a heavy heart and sword in hand, he started up the staircase after Mujiwara and the others, knowing his group needed to shrink the gap between them and the young pirate lest he leave without them. It wouldn't do to be left behind now after all they'd done to get this far.
Hey, what's that?
Naruto turned at the sound of Tayuya's wa, and subsequently felt his heart slam against his ribs. There, hanging on a ruined rail.
A hat. But not just any hat.
Tattered and bloody though it might be, he recognized it at once, the same hat worn by the man who had haunted his dreams until this very moment.
Blackbeard's hat.
It was in his hands almost before he realized it, his fingers wrapping around the worn fabric, wresting it from its perch with a forceful yank.
Yo, we gotta go.
Hush. This time it was Mei's elbow that planted itself between B's ribs.
Give him a second. He needs this.
Closure. Sasuke nodded in agreement. He understood the man's need to close this chapter in his life. Naruto held the hat for what felt like a small eternity, the only piece of Blackbeard that remained. Where the man and his crew were dead or not no longer mattered now. If they were alive, then he would crush them the next time they crossed paths.
If not, then there was no point in holding onto this hat, was there?
He gazed down at the lake of fire below, the smoldering inferno where the former Shichibukai most likely lay, his resting place in the seat of heat and flame, ultimately final.
It's over.
A voice soothed, somewhere deep inside of him.
Let it go. Were those his thoughts, or those of his mother? Was it her hand he felt on his shoulder now, willing him to move on?
Perhaps it was. With a supreme effort of will, he forced himself to let go, not just off the hat, but off the vendetta that had consumed him for the last 20 years. It fell from his grasp almost immediately, fluttering down and out into the empty space carved by his Raisin Shuriken. Naruto watched it go, waited with patient and bated breath as it touched the lake of fire below, those tongues of orange and yellow sweeping up to devour the faded fabric almost immediately, swallowing it whole. Good riddance, he muttered to himself.
Level 3. Look, we've been over this dash. You've chosen 3 already, Naruto. Sasuke pointed out as they strode past another cell block only a few minutes later. I deserve at least 2. That earned him a huff of annoyance, but the blonde didn't outwardly deny his request when the subject was broached for what felt like the upteenth time. Most cells had been cleared out by the riot, those precious few who yet remained had either chosen to stay, were deemed too dangerous to release, or were simply bored, he thought. This might be their last chance to gather potential allies Nakamado their cause before setting out to Marineford. Mei and the others had gone ahead to convey their decree to all the remaining prisoners, that with Blackbeard gone and Magellan otherwise incapacitated, their only enemy was time. If Luffy and Jinbei wanted to leave so badly, that was fine, but the Wraiths wouldn't, not until they were satisfied. Wraiths. They'd come up with the name somewhere between levels 3 and 4, if they were going to have a crew, it needed to have a name. Eventually they'd settled on Wraith. Much like the Mujiwara no Ichimi, the name hailed from Naruto's moniker, they all seemed to agree on it, because it reflected their teamwork, strike fast and disappear. It just made sense, almost everyone liked it. All except for B. Damn fool wanted their crew to be called the Wisps. As in Will-O-Wisp. That had been voted down. Unanimously. Just as he had then, Blonde refused to falter under his first mate's assertions now. It doesn't change the fact that I'm taking a gamble by letting you. Sasuke shot Naruto a pointed glare. Says the man who likes his dice. Hey, there's nothing wrong with a little risk every now and then. Style awayer. Alright. The captain flung up his hands in consternation. You've made your point. I'll let you pick someone, Just make it quick, damn it. He swept away in a current of wind, doubtless to inspect another cell in this starvation hell. That suited Sasuke just fine. There had to be some good bounties left on this level. Level 2 and 1 weren't even worth searching for. It was this, or nothing. He'd seen some cases in which a price didn't reflect someone's skill. He only prayed that was the case now. HN. The Uchiha permitted himself the smallest of smile as he inspected the surrounding cell block. Naruto might be a stubborn man at times, but he knew when to take and when to give the crew what they wanted. His own bloodlust had been satiated by the subsequent slaughter of Teach and later Magellan, though he suspected both would be back to torment them soon. A man like Magellan wouldn't be trapped in an illusion for long. And Teach, would Magellan's poison truly be enough to kill him? Sasuke held an unspoken sliver of doubt in his soul. Let's see here, Naruto was muttering to himself. It looks like aha. Oi, you. You wouldn't happen to be a navigator, would ya? Had Uchiha Sasuke paid closer attention, he might have realized Naruto wasn't addressing a prisoner, but rather a guard. Perhaps had he paid closer attention he might have noticed that said guard was different from the others, his dark hair curled back into a ponytail reminiscent of a pinnacle. Perhaps, were his senses more attuned, he would have realized that this marine was about to become their latest nakama, a lazy marine who'd been relegated to guard duty in the world's most impenetrable prison for sheer sloth, his mind preoccupied with wandering clouds and strategies that would make an admiral balk. This man had a name. Shikamaru. But Sasuke wasn't paying any attention to his captain's escapades, nor his musings. His attention was focused elsewhere, riveted on a nearby cell. His devil fruit had bestowed many blessings upon him, chief amongst them the ability to see. Not just with an eye, but with his very soul. His eyes were the very essence of his power, the ability to trap an enemy in nightmarish dream, conjure black flames with his eyes, summon forth an impenetrable juggernaut born of both bone and fire, controlled by his very mind, and even bend the very laws of reality themselves. With these eyes, he could see who was strong, and who was weak. And the man within this cell was beyond strong. Hello there, youngster. The driest of voices greeted his approach. What brings you way out here? We're seeking strong allies. Sasuke replied, unable to pierce the darkness with his gaze. Funny, that fool clown said the same thing. A slight chuckle answered his question. All bark and very little bite, that one. I'll ask you the same questions. Why should I join you? Do you have a plan to escape? A ship on which to sail? A strong crew to watch your back? He had none of these, and so I refused him. The figure behind the bars leaned forward on his haunches just then, exposing dark eyes framed by darker hair, matted brown locks revealing a strong, chiseled jaw set in a scowl. What do you have that would make me leave this cell? What was it that made you leave yours? The Uchiha paused, considering the man's inquiry. His onyx gaze swiveled back to Naruto's broad back, the blonde's distant form set upon some strange task or another. What was it about him that made him leave his cell in the first place? It certainly wasn't his charm. His skills, either. Perhaps it was his compassion? Naruto was open and honest, a rarity among pirates, possessing a willingness to help that went above and beyond a simple give-and-take relationship. He was simple. Simple. Yes, he had burdens of his own, their ordeal with Blackbeard had shown as much, but he didn't let them change who he was. He simply sought to right the wrongs he had been given, to change the hand that fate had dealt him. Sasuke envied that. I follow him because he seeks to right wrongs and answers to no one but himself, because he values loyalty and friendship above all. There was a silence. Abruptly, the stranger laughed. He seeks to tear down the old and usher in the new, then? An admirable goal, if there ever was one. I had such a dream once. To hear someone speak of it is refreshing. He rose, the chains that bound him clanking with the movement of his arms and legs. He was tall and lean, Sasuke realized, almost gaunt within his prisoner's uniform.
Congratulations, Uchiha Sasuke.
That same voice rumbled out at him, this time with the faint undercurrent of intrigue.
You've piqued my interest. Release me from these bonds of mine, and I will join you. Manacled hands pushed up against the bars in silent offering, Sasuke's blade was quick to grant them release. The chains practically crumbled away into dust at the touch of. You never told me your name.
The man ceased rubbing his wrists and raised his head, dark features sharpening in a slight smile.
Senju Hashirama. I can't believe I agreed to this.
Shikamaru groaned as he was led deeper and deeper into Impel Down, in search of new nakama, or so Naruto said.
Relax, will ya?
His captain soothed.
I've got everything under control. You'll love being a pirate, I promise. Shikamaru wasn't entirely certain about that.
He'd been content to simply lay down and play dead once the riot started. Capturing prisoners was too troublesome for him, anyway. It was that very same attitude that had landed him guard duty in Impel Down in the first place. Despite his intellectual genius and mastery of stratagems, he hadn't seen the point in applying himself against pirates who stood so far beneath him. It all felt so pointless, sometimes. Where was the challenge in facing uneducated brutes, who'd just as soon as shoot him than try to puzzle their ways out of his traps? But Naruto had proved himself to be no hapless pirate. His mind was as sharp as the blade he kept at his belt. He was no base prey, he was a predator, strong and proud. Master navigator though he might be, the former marine couldn't help but wonder if he'd made the right decision in joining him. Naruto had been poised to finish him off after he'd asked that last question. The moment he mentioned he was a navigator though, the blonde's entire demeanor changed. His crew was already the stuff of legends and Shika could see why. Naruto could be very persuasive when you gave him the chance. He certainly didn't know how to take no for an answer, that much remained certain. Now here he was, talked into becoming the very thing he'd sworn to fight against.
And for what? A chance to escape his boredom? Hell, if it meant he could get back to cloud watching with the occasional bit of navigating here and there, he didn't care. Who knew what adventures might await them? Oi, aren't you forgetting someone?
Naruto nimbly stepped aside as a wave of golden energy streaked past, tearing a swath of destruction where he'd been standing mere moments before. His blade flew forth from its sheath and swung backwards, the alabaster edge of his weapon effortlessly intercepting the jagged edge of a sword seconds later. A wrench of his wrist brought him face to face with his attacker, squaring off against a great mountain of a man who was as large as he was tall, and thrice as deadly. He certainly was no slouch when it came to swinging a blade. To have cut him like that was no small feat. A thin rent opened in his whiskered cheek before he managed to spin away, but the damage was already done.
Crazed golden eyes shone out beneath a mane of dark hair, those bright orbs fixated upon Naruto, his grin the stuff of madness.
Shikamaru sighed softly.
What was it you said? Everything under control? And I do.
The blonde's words ended in a pained grunt as he found himself in blade lock once more, the tapered edge of blade colliding with the serrated steel of his enemy. Blinding blows were exchanged in an instant, swordplay that no mere mortal had any chance of blocking, exchanged and parried at speeds beyond comprehension. Wounds were opened. Blood was spilled. Now, Shikamaru was no stranger to the sword, but even he found his eyes outmatched as the two combatants strove against one another. And then, Naruto calmly took one hand away from the hilt of his weapon, and pressed it to the man's chest.
Kaze no Yaiba. An enormous blade of red energy erupted from the splayed fingers of the Logia, its black mane blowing back at the force of the powerful attack. The black burst of oxygenated wind swiftly engulfed both Shikamaru and the swordsman, their eyes squinting against the hot light as the thin stones beneath their feet evaporated under the strength of the attack, leaving their attacker to stagger into the light. Holy shit!
Shikamaru found himself face to face with someone who had no business being here, a demon of death and destruction whose only purpose lay in seeking out stronger opponents. Though most of his face lay hidden in the shadows of the great undersea gale, there could be no denying the wounds he'd sustained to his chest,
no mistaking the bloodlust in those golden orbs. His was a face many had feared, and even more had hoped to be dead. Apparently, their hopes and prayers were in vain. Zaraka Kenpachi, madman of the South Blue, grinned from ear to ear, despite the injuries he'd sustained, and started forward at Naruto once again. "Oi, brat of Whitebeard. What's the matter? Fight like you mean it. Like you did before on level 6. Give me a fight." Golden light seemed to stream from the man, his strength rising with the desire to do battle. The slyest of hesitations showed in Naruto's sword arm, betraying his intention as he growled, deep and low in the back of his throat. "Oh, for the love of, stay down, will you? I'm not interested in fighting you right now." Cackling, the swordsman brought his blade crashing down. "I'm not giving you a choice, shitty brat." Before he could finish his swing, his sword met. "Who are you calling a brat?" Naruto hissed through gritted teeth, forcing his foe down through the air. "You bloodthirsty buffoon." He thrust a foot forward, slamming a kick into Zaraki's chest and sending the larger sailing into one of the agent cells opposite them. The lone Logia quickly shot forwards, almost immediately closing the gap between the fallen warrior and himself. Blades smashed and gnashed against one another, drawing sparks instead for an eternity before one of the warriors finally called out in pain. "Arg! Cho Odama," Naruto called as he hovered above the gaping hole in which Zaraki Kenpachi was buried, "Raisin Shuriken." The massive shrieking sphere leapt from his hand and into the hole, a dog freed from its chain. A massive wave of white energy plummeted downwards at the scar and the stone below, engulfing the hole within a web of wind. Shikamaru quickly darted backward, placing some much-needed distance between the two of them as his soon-to-be captain leered into the crater he'd created. "Is he dead?" The blonde opened his mouth to reply. "Ha ha ha," a voice rang out from the wreckage, dispelling all of Naruto's hopes at a premature victory. "This is it. This is the fight I've been waiting for. Against someone like you, I think I can fight all out. Don't go and die on me now, Uzumaki." Before he could even think to raise his weapon, Naruto's bleak blade found his neck. "You stay the fuck down," he warned, "or next time it's your head." Sometime later. "I see you've been busy," Naruto remarked as they happened upon one another again. Sasuke was mildly surprised to see that the blonde had gained some superficial wounds in the hours since they'd parted. A series of shallow gashes ran diagonal across the bare flesh of his right arm and chest. A small slice could still be seen where a blade had cut deep into his cheek. In contrast to the two nakama Sasuke had procured, Naruto had picked up a pair of his own, and they couldn't have been more unalike. "So have you." Zaraki Kenpachi was a giant in human form, his broad shoulder nearly scraping the arch as he crossed beneath it. Whereas Shikamaru looked utterly unassuming in his guard's uniform, the sole defining trait being that seemingly permanent frown and pineapple-ish ponytail. They couldn't have been more different. "Any particular reason why we're trusting an ex-Marine with our lives?" said Marine shrugged. "Never took much stock in the whole absolute justice thing anyway. I'd rather just sit around and cloud watch. If becoming a pirate gets me that, then so be it. You need me about as much as I need you, I suppose. The enemy of my enemy is my friend," Naruto quoted sagely, patting the slim man upon the shoulder. "What about you? Who are these two?" Hashirama cleared his throat. "I was under the impression you needed a shipwright." "Well, yeah, when we finally get a ship." "And her?" Naruto's gaze adjusted to the fourth and possibly final of their nakama, a petite-looking girl with brown eyes and auburn hair. "Shoot anything, Ten-Ten," Sasuke said by way of introduction. "You did say we needed a gunner." "Yes, but I fail to see just how she His gaze traveled the length of the prison, balefully regarding the skewered corpse of a guard. His throat was filled with shards of stone, doubtlessly sharpened during her stay in the gale. How Ten-Ten had managed to kill him with those, much less procure something to make them deadly enough to kill. Ten-Ten grinned.
Nice to meet ya, boss. You're not a fruit user? Naruto arched an eyebrow, mildly impressed by both the power and accuracy of her shot. Nope. The brunette shook her head. All natural ability right here. A slight frown marred the features of her face. That's not a problem, is it? No, not at all. Naruto replied. Zaraki here isn't a fruit user, either. The kid gave me a good fight. The Kenpachi rumbled at the Uchiha's questing stare. Figured if I follow him, I'd find even better battles. Sasuke sighed. A lazy navigator, a bloodthirsty swordsman, and a girl who could hit a target halfway across the prison. Their strange little family just kept growing, didn't it? Could this day get any worse? Naruto grinned as a dull rumble greeted them from upstairs. That was the signal. It was time to depart this wretched gale and make for the sea. On the plus side, I'm amused. And with that, they strode away. Straight from the mouth of hell. /N, and there you be. I'm having such a hard time choosing crew members. We've got a crew of legends already. Shikamaru, Tenten, Hashirama, and even Zaraki from Bleach. Shikamaru seems to be an obvious choice for the navigator. Almost everyone seems to agree on that one, but from there it's fuzzy. It should also be mentioned that Naruto is going to have a fairly large crew, and an even larger ship, possibly bigger than the Thousand Sunny. But whom, what to call it and how to write it? I hope you enjoyed this. My damn keyboard keeps acting up, so I apologize for any grammatical errors. The war of the best is nearly upon us. Look forward to it. So, in the immortal words of Atlas, review, would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Preview. Fleet Admiral Sengoku felt his jaw fall from his face as he beheld the gallery of rogues standing before him. Not only had Monkey D. Luffy landed in the thick of the fighting, but there, on the ship opposite him, a second vessel, carrying perhaps the most deadly criminals the world had ever seen, and more than a few traitors to the cause of justice. And there, standing at the helm of the second vessel, a visage as legendary as it was all but terrifying, his whiskered face pulled back in a fearsome smile. What's he doing here? Indeed, Naruto's grin could have made the darkest demon look tame. Hello, corpses. Across the battlefield, Edward Newgate felt his mouth twitch in the beginnings of a grin. Gorarara, so you finally decided to show up, boy. Chapter 7, Let the Sparks Fly. You people are crazy. Says the man who became a pirate. I'm starting to regret that now. Naruto cackled heartily, his laughter momentarily overpowering their navigator's screams as their vessel plummeted from the frozen wave, dropping directly into the battle raging below. But not just any base battle was this, no mere clash of marines and pirates towards which they were falling. This was Marineford. The center of the marine might. Their base of operations on the Grand Line. Gathered down there were the greatest men and women that the Navy had to offer. Their admirals, Shichibukai, vice-admirals, strongest of soldiers, best swordsmen, most accomplished of snipers. The best of the best, were here. The grunts and incompetents, those not fit to fight a battle of this magnitude, had been left at home. If one were to smash the Marines here, they would shatter like so much glass, and the world government would never truly recover. With their back broken, the world would be easy pickings. But you can't hurt Hancock. Luffy's words rang through his mind. She helped me. Then I'll leave her be. Naruto decided to himself. But if she gets in my way, she's dead, just like the rest. Zaraki seemed to mirror this thought, an unsettling grin had taken up residence on the large man's face. Naruto didn't have to look to know he wore the same sinister smile. His blood sang at the thought of a fight like this, even the thoughts of confronting his grandfather were pushed to the back of his mind. They had that much in common, at least. Both loved a good fight. Naruto simply knew when to choose his battles. Kenpachi didn't care who he fought, so long as they were strong. Here was a man who had come up from nothing, carving a name for himself with the sword. Killing was simply in his blood. Are we there yet, Kenny? And then there was that. Naruto willed himself not to look at the little girl perched on Zaraki's shoulder, but it was almost impossible not to stare at her pink hair and be confounded. Yuichiro Kusajishi. She was a tiny thing, a seemingly innocuous bystander amidst a band of cutthroats. Kenpachi had made her a part of the deal, releasing his daughter from level 1 shortly before their departure. Her bounty was a mere 75 million as opposed to the whopping 480 million placed on the swordsman's head, and with his subsequent escape from Impel Down, it was Bounto. Oi, Yuichiro, didn't I tell you to keep out of sight? But I was bored. Well, go be bored somewhere else. His slate gray eyes, no longer that airy yellow, turned to regard an irate Tayuya. Go hang on to Red over there, will ya? Hi. I ain't her damned babysitter. You'll have to be, Naruto chuckled softly, I'm going to need him once we land. We'll be cutting a path right through the enemy. Yeah ha 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 ha. The man bellowed with his strange laugh, voice roaring in their descent. This is why I follow you, kid. Big battles. It doesn't get any better than this. Ain't tha right? His enthusiasm was met with a few grumbles of annoyance on the part of their comrades, and a bright grin from Yuichiro. That doesn't change the fact that we're still falling. Shikamaru shouted, struggling to make himself heard over the increasingly high-pitched wind. Someone does something before we crash. His words were met with silence. Well, I'm already doing all I can. Naruto shrugged. My wind is the only reason we haven't dashed ourselves on the ice yet. Kabuto, a peculiar marine they'd found aboard the ship and the sole survivor of the massacre made to hijack this very vessel, quietly adjusted his spectacles with an offhand. If you'd like, I could calculate our chances of being shot down before we'd hit the ground. There's a 75% ratio a cannon will target us long before. I don't want to hear anything from you, introvert. Why not? The young man inquired. We're both fugitives from justice now, aren't we? The only difference is that I know which way the wind's blowing. The subtle dig left the normally level-headed navigator flush with anger, his cheeks flaring a rare red in the wind slash. Why are you still here, anyway? My charming personality? That earned a few laughs from the Wraith crew. The silver-haired man hadn't indicated his allegiance toward either side yet, he was merely along for the ride. He claimed to have no special skill set, no weapon save an odd-looking scalpel strapped to his belt, and subpar medical talent at best. He knew how to bandage a wound and keep it from becoming infected, something of a staple considering the wounds Kenpachi had sustained after his brief scuffle with Naruto in Impel Down. Not a pirate, and yet no longer a marine. Neither enemy nor ally. They didn't know what to make of him. He professed a willingness to go his own way once they reached Marineford, that seemed impossible now as they fell to their doom. There's nothing we can do now, anyway. Sasuke sighed, the Uchiha having secured himself safely in the rigging the moment they'd broken free from the frozen tsunami. Look! He indicated Luffy's falling ship with a slender finger, the first galleon already well ahead of them, making for lone point of water amidst all the ice. They're in no better shape than we are. Mugiwara had commandeered that vessel back at Impel Down, and they, this one, not wanting anything to do with the boys' foolhardy plan. They just so happened to share the same destination. That was all. Killer Bee harumphed agreement at that, clinging to the mast with all his might. Yo, bro. Just go with the flow. That flow of yours better not involve us getting crushed against the ice. Tayuya piped in, her hazel eyes nervously regarding the fast-approaching glaciers below, red dress fluttering wildly. Naruto's wind had slowed their descent enough to try and make their landing salvageable, but even then, there was only so much he could do. In a few seconds, a minute at most, they were going to announce their arrival.
whether they wanted to or not. Relax, Ten chirruped happily, steadfastly sharpening a knife as she hung upside down from a rail. She, of all the wraiths, seemed most at ease with their current predicaments. I mean, the worst we can do is die, right? I'm just happy to be out of Impel Down again. Again? Tried to escape, once. Her chocolate brown eyes glanced briefly in Naruto's direction before returning to the knife in her hand. Almost worked, too. I was right there at the docks before they caught me. But at least I got a bounty rise out of it. Well, in hindsight, that made sense. Why else would the price on her head be 355 million? If she really could make a weapon out of anything, shoot anything, then the lithe brunette truly was a force to be reckoned with, an enemy not to be made lightly. How'd you do it? Just like any musician, Tayuya loved a good story. Even if had to be told while they were falling to their death. Lured a guard in close and gouged his eyes out. She replied matter-of-factly. Remember babe, men are easy, it's the women you gotta watch out for. There never were enough of them in the Marines. You were a Marine? Was. For the first time since they'd met her, a touch of anger entered Tenten's tone, her slender fingers grinding around the hilt of her knife. I'd always wanted to be one ever since I was a little girl. It was a dream of mine, you know? Go out to sea, travel the world, kill a few pirates. Pirates. Oh, my bad. Her words faltered at Naruto's questioning stare. I'm not like that now. You guys are all right. It's just, back then, I was convinced he was right, that absolute justice was the way to go. I mean, he was my dad, and all. There was a silence. You mean? Yeah, my career was fast-tracked by Akainu himself, alright? Her eyes cut bloody red dagger into the lot of them. He's my papa. It's not something I'm proud of, not anymore. I signed up for the Marines to be more like him, ended up a vice admiral almost before I even knew what was happening. Tends to happen when you're the daughter of the Red Dog himself. People make way for you, fear or respect you. I didn't care. To me fear and respect were one and the same. I was so sure of myself, I didn't think anything could touch me, or the men I led. Thought I was invincible. Maybe I was. But I wasn't infallible. The hell happened? Apparently the world government likes their Marines corrupt, sweetheart, they don't take kindly to meddling, especially when you try to weed out said corruption. Doesn't matter if you're in Vice Admiral, Admiral, or even Sengoku himself. I got curious, wondered why more and more civilian casualties kept appearing on the reports. My reports. I knew I wasn't the one doing it, turns out my men were enjoying their privileges more than I thought, if you know what I mean. The second I investigated those allegations, I found myself clapped in irons and hauled off to marry a Joa. I was presented with a choice. Either kill my men or spend the rest of my life in prison. But I knew how to pick a lock, and they forgot that I wasn't some weak-willed woman who could be ordered around. So, I cut myself loose. Instead of butchering my men for their misconduct, I ended up slaughtering a few government officials before anyone knew what was happening. Maybe even a Tenri Yubito or two before they took me down. That was, what? 4 or 5 years ago? Time gets funny in a cell. By all rights they could have made me one of their slaves, but Akainu had me tossed in Impel Down instead. Said they wouldn't let me out until I reconsidered my actions. And you still haven't? Naruto frowned, something about her being the daughter of Akainu didn't sit well with him. How would she react to facing her father down there? On the other hand, he knew a thing or two when it came to familial issues, though he couldn't claim his past with Whitebeard to be anywhere near as storied. Just like that, her cheery grin returned. Still haven't. If I see my old man down there, I'll bury a knife in his chest. Tayuya's sweat dropped. Where did you find this crazy bitch, boss? I think she's quite chipper. Mei, much like Naruto, didn't share the fear of falling to death, her Logia body prevented any such happenstance. What did worry her, however, was the water. She'd never been that much of a strong swimmer even before she'd eaten the kiri no mi. The thought of coming so far, only to be met with a watery grave, was disquieting. Naruto shared her fear, but he refused to let it show, or let Shikamaru's shouts of concern derail him from his excitement. Why couldn't that lazy fool see? It wasn't the destination that mattered, it was the ride along the way. They were finally here. Maybe the boy's right, the grave voice of their shipwright finally interjected, making his opinion known. If we hit the ice, even I won't be able to salvage the ship, and without it, how do you plan to escape from here, Captain? Naruto craned his neck and squined toward Senju Hashirama, regarding the newly armored man with a faint curiosity. He'd spoken very little since they'd first met, preferring instead to relegate himself to the task of tending to the ship, mending the wounds it had sustained during their hostile takeover. Relax, this one's a loner, remember? The words came easily to him. Even if they did survive, he wanted no business sailing on a marine ship. Former or otherwise. If we do make it out of here, we can always swing by Water 7 and ask them to build us a ship. I've got a couple 100 billion berries stashed away in one of my old safe houses, assuming it hasn't been ransacked. We can get ourselves a warship, bigger and better than this one. What do you say, Senju? The shipwright frowned. It feels wrong, scuttling something so beautiful. His hand touched the mast lovingly, fingers working into the wood. The great galleon was indeed massive. Hashirama had been fussing over it ever since they'd climbed aboard, tinkering with it ways that Naruto couldn't comprehend. Naruto silently applauded Sasuke for finding the shipwright. The man was a born natural, a complete master of his craft. It certainly helped that he had command over wood thanks to his devil fruit. One might think that the paramecia wasn't suited for combat, but Naruto had seen firsthand what he could do when provoked. A Logia he might not be, but the man wielded his power in ways Naruto wouldn't have thought possible. He was a fighter all right, just like the rest of them in his own way. How else would your head be worth 425 mil? Whatever he'd done, he must have really pissed someone off. But what the devil had he done to land himself in Impel Down? That was truly the question of the hour, an answer Naruto didn't think he'd ever have. Very well. He conceded at last. Assuming we survive the battle to come, I'd welcome the chance to sail on such a ship. I'm liking the sound of that, too. Mei smiled. Tayuya grinned. Hell yes. Why don't we think up a name for it first? Sasuke added as the ground roared up to welcome them with open arms. I'm not sailing on so nameless ship. We're deciding this now? Shikamaru gawped. Why wait? Kabuto snipped back. The kid's right, now's as good a time as any. Zaraki shrugged. Aye. Yachiru chirruped. Kenny's right. So? Dorjin Arc? Nah, that's been done. Wouldn't want to get sued. We're pirates, how would anyone sue us? Next. Konoha? Are you crazy? That's the most common name there is. Maelstrom? Maybe? How about my pride is a hurricane? Naruto interjected. That sounds like a good one. Denied. Everyone, save Mei, shot that idea down in an instant. Petulant, their captain tried again. How about just hurricane then? Would that work? The aging Senju actually cracked a wan smile at that idea. Say, I actually like that one. Seconded. Sasuke grunted. A chorus of approvals followed, reaffirming his decision. In case you've forgotten, some of us aren't superhuman. I hope you have a doctor on hand, because we're going to need one. Oh, right. Naruto smacked a fist into his palm. A doctor. Did we get one of those? No.
His grin only grew as a shudder ran through his crew. Ha! Knew I forgot something.
For a long moment there was a silence, broken only the howling of the wind and the sound of conflict below.
And then. You forgot?
If then you're looking for a doc, Kenpachi spoke up suddenly, sounding strange.
I might just know one. Really? Ask me if we live through this.
Then there was no more time for thought. The ice was mere millimeters away now and all conversation would have to wait until later.
Much later.
The galleon convulsed as Hashirama's fortifications came apart, the keel all but shattering as the heavy vessel made contact with the frozen bay.
For a terrifying instant everyone feared the ship wouldn't hold.
But then the ice broke beneath them, exploding outward in a sea of salty and spray.
But their ordeal wasn't over yet. Brace yourselves, we're going to hit the BAKRAM. Everything stopped. Everyone stopped fighting.
The world simply ceased to be. All eyes turned toward the mighty crash, gawping at the great galleons that had landed right in their lap. No one but two each bore a crew that would make even the most hardened of hearts quiver in fear. It certainly didn't help that the second wreck remained shrouded in an eerie fog preventing any and all eyes from peering into the gloom. But the silence prevailed in the end, the Marines eventually recovering first as they beheld the two scuttled ships.
Ararara,
Akiji murmured, peering down into the wreckages.
This can't be good. That's surprised me. Kizaru drawled. Akainu remained decisively silent as the smoke began to clear. We actually made it. And we're here. 'Bout damn time. Quit complaining, Kenpachi. You wanted a fight, now you've got plenty. Red's right. Kenchan's going to kill everyone. She does mean everyone but us, right? Seriously guys, I'm not ready to die yet. Relax, Tenten. Nobody's going to lay a hand on you, alright? As expected of my captain. You really are protective. Still, a woman's voice intruded, perhaps I should lift the fog? It wouldn't do for us to be shot without being seen. Good point. Raise it.
Fleet Admiral Sengoku felt his jaw fall from his face as he beheld the gallery of rogues standing before him. Not only had Monkey D. Luffy landed in the thick of the fighting, but there, on the ship opposite him, a second vessel, carrying perhaps the deadliest criminals the world had ever seen, and more than a few traitors to the cause of justice. And there, standing at the helm of the second vessel, a visage as legendary as it was all but terrifying, his whiskered face pulled back in a fearsome smile. What's he doing here? Indeed, Naruto's grin could have made the darkest demon look tame. A black gale circled his body to tug at his scarlet jacket and rustle through his battered hair, belying his almost hellish appearance. Cruel crimson blue eyes balefully regarded the score of pirates and marines down at his feet as though they were naught but ants, his lips pulling back to expose those deadly canines. Two words snaked past his lips, and yet they inspired fear in every single soldier and pirate assembled before him. Hello, corpses. Across the battlefield, Edward Newgate felt his mouth twitch in the beginnings of a grisly grin. Even in old age these eyes of his did not lie, he knew that face. The same visage that had spat upon him and cursed him for failing to save his mother, now older and worn, endowed with experience and power beyond his years. He felt strength return to these old bones of his, a fierce joy that outstripped even the love he had for his sons and Ace surging through his veins, leaving him feeling stronger than he'd ever felt before. Gorararara, so you finally decided to show up, boy. Is he still alive? Naruto nudged Shikamaru's prone form with a boot. The poor navigator had collapsed the moment they'd hit the ice, the whites of his eyes showing in that haunted face. No, I think he's dead now. Sasuke replied. Unintelligible gibberish streamed forth from the former marine's mouth. Pirates, why did it have to be pirates? Yup, he's alive. Hashirama, do me a favor and revive him while I take care of this. Chuckling, the blonde turned to regard the vessel opposite him. Oi, Mujiwara. You're on your own, for now. We're going our separate ways in a minute. With it he unsheathed his blade, eyeing the scaffoldings that blocked him from his objective. Its keen edge glistened in the sunlight, shimmering with untold power. HRMM. That wall's going to be a problem. He murmured. But not for long. Right, partner? Sasuke blanched. He knew that look. What are you going to do? I thought up a new move when we took down Magellan. The blonde confessed. Did you know a Hydra's an actual dragon? His hand drew back, fingers clenched into claws around the hilt of his blade. Sasuke always meant to ask him where he'd gotten that weapon, whom he'd claimed it from. It seemed to glow now in his grasp, the seafoam-colored blade pulsating in unnatural green as he held it. A crazed grin tore across his face just then as he breathed in and out, the silent harbinger of what was to come. The wind rose around him, angry and keening for marine blood. Blood he would gladly give. Atop the wall, Akiji bristled. Oi, he isn't going to. Daishinkan. Great Dragon Shock. With a grunt, the blonde dropped it. He did not drop the blade, as in release it, he simply dropped the sword, cutting down in a motion so sudden and swift, it was nearly invisible to the human gaze. Uchiha Sasuke's eyes were anything but human. However, he saw what Naruto was aiming for, not the admiral, but the wall itself. Marineford exploded. Chunks of stone and masonry blew outward and drifted like paper on the breeze, debris and bodies sailing as one in all directions as the slash made its mark. There could be no other word for it. One moment the wall was there, the next it was just gone. One swing of his blade had done the deed, its edge naked one moment, then sheathed the next. He cut through the wall with just one swing. A marine screamed. Someone do something. Get the admirals. Naruto wasn't listening. Alright you dogs, listen up. This is an order from your captain. His voice thundered across the frozen tundra, making itself known to all alongside his wild smile. I hereby order you, each and every one of you, to go wild. /N, and there you be. Despite my illness, I was so moved by your many reviews that I worked RALLY hard to get this up. I delved a bit into everyone's past in this chapter. We see just what motivated them to follow after Naruto. It should be mentioned in any case that absolute chaos is about to ensue, what with Naruto telling his crew to go all out and wreak havoc. He'll finally get to chat with his Gramps as of next chapter, and their body count will nothing short of enormous. Look forward to it, y'all. So, in the immortal words of Atlas, review, would you kindly? And of course, enjoy the preview. Next chapter. Of Gods and Men. Preview. Everything was falling apart. Their fortifications were collapsing, their flank was all but broken, not even the timely arrival of Sentomaru and the pacifistas had done anything to hamper the raids, they'd simply blown through the portly man and his small army of cyborgs. He had no idea what their goal was. Naruto and his crew seemed intent to cause as much chaos as possible. But they hadn't yet reached the courtyard. There was still time to execute Portgas d'Ace and put an end to this farce of an invasion. Now if he could just get past Whitebeard and join the battle. He hissed in pain as a bloody trench opened his chest, the crimson stain virtually invisible amidst his coat. Ever since that boy had set foot in Marineford, he had caught a second wind. If he didn't know better, he'd wager that the old man was actually happy. Inugami Gorin. Halfway across the battle, Shirohige plowed forward, uncaring for the burst of magma that struck him square in the chest. Sakazuki actually started, the man just kept coming. That damned grandson of yours. Edward Newgate spat out a bloody gob, and incredibly, stood up again. His white mustache bristled above his smile, a throat gororara. tearing its way out of his throat. Pride swelled in his chest as he watched that boy, pride not just for himself, but that his son's Minato's legacy lived on through his child. His grandson. Gripping his halberd with renewed purpose, the strongest man in the world dragged his aching body upright a second later, rising to his full, towering height. Even wounded he was a fearsome sight. How much more could he take? What had that boy said to him back there to give him such resolve? He's not that easy to kill. Cracks formed as his fist slammed into the air, the tremor fruit wreaking havoc on the battlefield once more. Akainu had only an instant to register that before he was flung forth from his feet, the man's massive hand closing around his throat in a crushing vice. And neither am I. For a long moment Akainu said nothing, his right arm pulsating an eerie shade of scarlet/crimson as he hung there, trapped within the larger man's grasp. Hellhound. A single word hissed through clenched teeth as he brought that arm around, sheathing the molten limb elbow deep in the man's chest. For the first time in nearly a decade Whitebeard staggered. He tasted blood when he breathed. Crippling pain in his chest, numbness in his legs and heat in places where it should not be, heat everywhere. Guh. Halfway across the battlefield, Naruto froze. He felt something lurch in his chest, those all-seeing eyes turning back to regard the underhanded attack. Time seemed to slow, the currents of fate and destiny dragging the moment to a standstill in his eyes. Old man? That's it for this reading. Hit like and subscribe for a free ticket pass going to the different worlds of anime fanfiction. Looking forward to having you on board again.